Hello there. If you take a good look at my channel, I would not blame you if you thought I hated gacha games. And I don't. As a matter of fact, I really do enjoy a lot of the gacha games that I play. They're my favorite time sink experiences in the modern day. I have invested hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, hell, thousands of hours into a lot of the games I've played. Therefore, I care about them more than most people do. I would even argue it is to an unhealthy degree sometimes. And unfortunately, one of my favorite ways to express gratitude to games that I appreciate is through expressing how it could be better. And while a lot of people may see it as very negative, I really wish the majority of the community believed this, because unfortunately with a lot of gacha games, or hell, games in general, they see generosity as complacency, and complacency is just an excuse for them to do something worse in the future. There are no exceptions to this rule. I don't care what game you play. If you think the developers of X game like you and your community and they treat you good because they appreciate you, they don't. 9 times out of 10, they're just doing it so they can build up this lovely little currency called reputation. And reputation is something you can trade for raw profit later on. But I wouldn't blame you if you saw the title of the series, How to Kill a Gacha Game, and immediately thought that I absolutely hate the games I'm talking about, because I really don't. That being said, there are a lot of ways you can ruin your game, and I brought them up in a previous video, that being when I talked about power creep in Star Rail, and how power creep is one of the biggest contributing factors to player discontent in pretty much any game. But it's especially bad in something like the gacha scene, where you are expected to invest a serious amount of your time, energy, and effort into acquiring new units that will eventually get laid out later on along the lines. It feels like shit to have an interest in X character who you really enjoy, but over the course of a year they slowly become less and less relevant through the introduction of new, shinier, more powerful units. But I'm not here to talk to you about power creep for the 1000th time, because there's a different issue that plagues pretty much every game I'm currently playing right now, and that is feature creep. But before we get into that, I have a proposal. I'm doing a giveaway, but not for Welkin, not for Genesis Crystals, not for anything cringe like that, no. I'm doing a giveaway for this door. 100% genuine wood, ripped straight off the hinges of some random guy's bedroom. All you gotta do is like and subscribe. I know a lot of you are returning viewers, and now you get a chance to earn this genuine door I stole, borrowed from somebody's home. But before we continue, it's time to pay my editors. This time, we're sponsored by LD Shop. Look man, I play a lot of gacha games. I know you do too. Things get pretty expensive after a while, so it's nice to be able to get a little bit of a discount here and there, because at the end of the day, every cent saved is a cent earned. And by using LD Shop, you'll be saving a lot of cents. LD Shop offers up to a 20% discount on all in-game items. And if you want, you could save a little bit more money, with the link down below earning you up to an additional $50 off your next order. And because I'm not one to just throw you to the wolves and have you figured out for yourself, don't worry, I actually tested out the service myself. As you can see, we're currently in Genshin, as you can tell by my ugly filters that you all love to comment on so much. Gonna go on over to LD Shop, go to Genshin, get one of the 3 welcome packs. Make sure you select the right server. If you don't, there's nothing you can do for you. Put in the ID. I just copy pasted mine directly from in-game, by the way. You can add me if you want to. And then top up. Alright, and now that the transaction's completed, we're just gonna wait in-game for a little bit and get our item. Okay, there it is, as soon as I alt-tab back into the game. 1, 2, 3. As you can all see, I got my 122 items pretty much immediately, and yeah, I mean, that's pretty much it. So there you go. Save yourself some money, use the link in the description, really helps support the channel. That all being said, let's get back into the video. But I digress. We're talking about feature creep. I know a lot of you have come to my channel from Genshin, and I've made a couple of videos ranting and rambling about whatever current thing in Genshin bothers me. I've even talked about feature creep before. That being said, I do play other games, and I want to talk about a really recent experience that's happening in a game I really enjoy. Wuthering Waves. Yeah, that's right. This video video is a thinly veiled excuse for me to talk about this game. So believe it or not, I actually do play Wuwa. I know a lot of you think I don't, and I know a lot of you were really mad when my first Wuthering Wave video was shitting on the anniversary, but to that I say, my first video ever was shitting on Genshin's anniversary, so time really is a flat circle. But I've played Wuwa since day one. You can see that in my UID, you can see that in my union level. Like, I've been here for a bit. I just tend to stray away from the community of the game for my own personal reasons. That being said, I'm coming out because recently there have been a lot of changes to the game which I feel like spell a very bad direction for its future. I previously talked about how the anniversary is just one big money grab with 12 banners, paid skins, a shortened patch to celebrate the anniversary only to lock anniversary rewards behind a 23-day long timer so you can't use it on the fucking anniversary banner character. A lot of scummy things you would expect from a company run by Tencent. But there's another storm a-brewing. Recently, the devs decided they were going to implement a new debuff system, the first feature of the game that isn't necessarily tied to raw damage. This being the Frazzle system, or I'm going to call it the debuff system. Previously, there was no way to debuff enemies this consistently or in a way that genuinely affected gameplay in a significant way. But with the introduction of Phoebe, players received a actually consistent way to proc Spectro Frazzle, which basically allows you to get buffs on your own character while debuffing the enemy. However, it didn't really mean that much because there weren't that many scenarios where Phoebe was able to fully take advantage of the ability to debuff enemies. That being said, it really didn't matter because Phoebe's own personal damage was nothing to scoff at. It was still pretty impressive. That is no longer the case. With the introduction of the new character Zani, we're starting to see the beginning of a worrying trend. Zani is a character whose entire damage source is tied to Spectro Frazzle, which doesn't necessarily sound like a big deal until you realize that Spectro damage and Spectro Frazzle damage are completely different. And unless you have Phoebe, there is no way to buff Spectro Frazzle damage, which means these two characters are inherently linked to each other at the hip because they share the exact same feature. Now, it isn't the first time something like this has happened. There are characters that are limited time 5 stars that buff other limited time 5 stars. For example, Shorekeeper buffs literally everybody, and Jeji, a previous coordinated attack cryo support, is actually one of the best in slot characters who's almost inseparable to somebody like, for example, Carlotta. But the difference between these two is Jeji buffs raw skill. She buffs cryo. This character is specifically made to buff a new feature that was added to the game post-release, making it so that she is inherently necessary to make Zani perform at optimal performance. Now, some of you may hear that and think, oh, what's the difference? 10%? 20%? No, it can't be anything small like that. Phoebe buffs Spectro Frazzle damage by 100%, just flat. And if you get her weapon, it buffs it further by another 30%. Now, I've seen a lot of people say that, oh wow, she buffs damage by 130%. This is so ridiculous. And that is a little overblown. It's actually not an 130% overall DPS increase. No, it's not. It's actually more like 70%, which is still ridiculous. That is insane. That is more than what most characters C4 gets them. And not only that, Zani's signature weapon is a 37% difference from the free-to-play alternative options or the standard 5-star option. Now, I know a lot of you hear the number 37%, and that doesn't really mean a lot to you. Okay, in a game like this, the multipliers are a lot lower than something like in Star Rail or Genshin. And I know Wuwa players hate it when you compare their game to these two, but it's what my audience knows. That 10 to 20% difference in these games is usually the difference between a limited time 5-star weapon and a free-to-play 4-star weapon. And the difference in damage is usually high enough to consider it worth pulling. However, 10% in Wuthering Waves is significantly larger than it is in something like Genshin, because the overall multipliers across the board are a lot lower. So a 30% difference for Zani's Sig compared to her free-to-play alternatives is an absolutely insane amount. Not only that, she wants Shorekeeper, she wants Phoebe. This is a team comp specialized around a new feature that has a cost 6 team, and cost 6 means 3 limited time 5 stars, 3 limited time weapons, in order to make it work. And if you don't have Phoebe, if you don't have Phoebe's signature weapon, if you don't have Zani's signature weapon, you are looking at over half of your total damage immediately gone. It is absolutely insane. Oh, and here's the best part. Zani is the anniversary unit. They ran her at the exact same time they're running her best support, and there are 12 banners running this patch total. The devs knew what they were doing, and this is only one example of feature creep in video games. Let's talk about Star Rail. Again, I will dog on Star Rail every single day until the fucking cows come home, but nobody can tell me that I didn't at least give that game a shot. Played it for 2 years, and I ended up quitting because of feature creep. It originally started in version 2.0. With the introduction of the DOT teams, Black Swan and Kafka became meta for the first time in ages. It was the first real team comp outside of very niche cases where you could build a meta team around really nothing. However, you probably noticed something already. The team was very expensive. If you wanted it to work, you were going to need Kafka, Black Swan, and Huohuo to make it perform even halfway of what was optimal, on top of getting the light cones for the specific characters. Now, much like Zani, you could make it work without using these characters, but you are looking at significant losses in your total damage by doing this. However, with this coming out in version 2.0, a lot of players assumed at that moment that this was going to be the feature of version 2.0. But the devs very quickly realized that they can make more money if they introduce more features that follow a chain like this. Thus, they released the Super Break characters. However, Super Break couldn't be weaker than DOT, because then players wouldn't really want to invest in the new system, and thus we get into what I call feature creep, where they instead decided that they're going to push out the new shiny DPS Firefly and Boothill, two Super Break DPS units that were able to easily output some of the highest damage in the game with little to no investment. However, their teams were very specific. They pretty much all wanted MC, and every character that followed under the Break team usually wanted to have their light cone. Because it was a new feature, there weren't really that many good free-to-play options outside of Firefly and her signature. And as time went on, they began to release more and more characters that hyper-buffed the Super Break system, making it so that if you wanted to use these characters, you were going to need to pull even more limited time characters. It got to the point where they were punishing you for using the free-to-play teams, with the absolute apex of this occurring in the Fentilia Apoc Shadow, where it encouraged you to use break comps, but punished you if you tried to use the free-to-play variants of it. You needed Linksha in order to follow the mechanics of the boss. You needed Fugue in order to have enough AoE. The devs were now punishing you for using weaker versions of the new featured system. And what did you do all that farming for? Nothing, because immediately in version 3.0 they introduced a new feature, this time an entire new classification of character. And because it's a new class of character, they can produce new classes of light cone, meaning you have absolutely no other alternatives at the time of release, and you better start pulling for that new limited time light cone because you have not had enough time to max out your free battle pass shit yet. And this was around the time where I just dropped the game, releasing a whole bunch of new limited characters, and then releasing a bunch of new powerful weapons that can only be equipped on those characters, and then making it so that if you try to use a free-to-play alternative, you are punished by either game's mechanics ruining your chance of having a halfway decent, not RNG fucked run, or you just straight up lose 30 to 70% of your overall team damage. It's so bad to the point that new characters in HSR just straight up have a lot of their kit locked behind a light cone paywall for some reason. And hell, Genshin's now doing it too. I've heard a lot of people complain about Natlin. Hell, I have a video myself in the works right now where I'm complaining about a lot of the problems I have with Natlin. But if I had to ping out easily the biggest issue, it would be the introduction of the Night Soul mechanic. What the hell, guys? Again, follows the same stock standard procedure as I've listed before, releasing a new mechanic, releasing some free-to-play options, and then proceeding to absolutely dog-water the mechanic with 8 new limited-time premium 5-star characters that want to have their 5-star weapon in order to perform at peak efficiency. Otherwise, it gimps their use case. However, unlike all of the cases I've given before, they have a character that sits atop the throne of this new feature with Mavuika, who straight up loses her ability to ult on every rotation if you are not playing her with at least 3 Night Soul characters. Because why not? And hell, they even pulled the Wuthering Waves and released both of the best characters that were inherently tied together in the form of Sitlali and Mavuika at the same time. Why? And hell, Genshin's even pulling a Star Rail, and they're making it to where where now all the in-game modes will heavily revolve around this new feature, and I hope to God Wuthering Waves doesn't do it too. Oh, you wanna try and beat the new in-game mode? Oh well, do you have Mavwika? Do you have any two of the overpowered Night Soul support characters like Zelenin and Silali? Oh, you don't? Damn bro, that's a shame. Well, it doesn't matter, because we gave you this awesome Kachina you can drag in. Players don't like that. Hell, you've probably seen from my background footage, I have a lot of the characters I'm complaining about. I've played these games for so long that I have such an immense backlog of resources that I'm able to get them. But just because I have the character that it wants me to use for the new shiny mechanics system that is designed to fuck you if you don't meet it, doesn't mean it's not a problem for everybody else who doesn't. That being said, feature creep in any game just plainly sucks, and I don't like dealing with it. It's fine if you want to add some new spice to the system so that players don't get bored of the combat, but when you begin locking behind significant portions of what should have been basic bits of the kit behind insanely high paywalls that half the community can't even reach, then it starts to become a problem. And it's even bigger of a problem when you begin to only cater to the new system and completely disregard the entire progression point that existed beforehand. And I know I'm not the only one. I'm sure everybody doesn't like feeling like they have to pay God knows how much money in order to get the basic part of the kit that should have been in there to begin with. And while it's easy to maybe make the argument of, oh, you don't need that damage to clear the endgame anyway, to that I say, why the fuck would you lock it behind so many paywalls if you didn't need it to begin with? Is what it is, man. It's just something that annoys me. I was thinking about it. So that's about it. Like, comment, subscribe. See ya.